chapters are the most difficult one. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here on time. We are towards the end of chapter 10, and thank you for being here. Just a short introduction to what we covered until now, thus far. And by the way, today, the 20th of Av, is the yahrzeit of 79th anniversary of the Rebbe's father, Reb Levi Yitzchak. My son is named after him. There are many, many Levis in Chabad. And being that it is on his yahrzeit, we are studying in his memory to dedicate it for him. We just covered last week the idea of an incomplete tzaddik. Incomplete tzaddik has two names. Tzaddik veralo, a tzaddik that does have evil, or tzaddik she'eino gamur, a righteous man that is not incomplete. And the reason is they both come to the same idea. The man does not even think of doing something wrong, definitely will not speak or do something inappropriate. However, the evil is still around, still exists. How do we know? And we share the idea, as the Rebbe says, by looking at the negativity. If the person does not hate and despises a sin, it's a sign that his love for God is not complete. And that's why it's called incomplete tzaddik, because his love and connection to God is not 100%. And the Rebbe completed to say that in this idea of incomplete tzaddik, there are myriads of levels. There is no two that are the same. In other words, the level of the slipping of the evil, or the way the existence of the little bit of evil is different from person to person. So there can be myriads upon myriads upon myriads. And the Gemara tells us, as we find in the Gemara, that's where we finish, 18,000 tzaddikim stand before the Holy One, blessed be He. Thus, though many attain the level of tzaddik, they are in fact incomplete tzaddikim. So throughout history, there have been 18,000 tzaddikim. I'm sorry, if you take 18,000 divided by how many years the universe exists, 5,784, let's say 6,000, divide 1,800 by 6,000, how much are we getting? This is incomplete tzaddik. 18,000 divided by 5,784, you get to 3,000 a year, each year, 3,000, not 3,000, 3 in every year. So if we live 70 years, we might have seen 70 tzaddikim around the globe. So in each generation of 25, there are about 25 tzaddikim. These are, it's average. I'm sure during the Talmudic time there were many and now much less, but this is the average of 3 per year, divided by 1,800 divided by 5,784 is 3.1, which means every year there are 3.1 tzaddikim. Says the Rebbe, this is an incomplete tzaddik. However, says the Rebbe, but concerning the rank of the complete tzaddik, when we deal with a complete tzaddik, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai statesman applies, I have seen superior men, bnei aliyah, and they are but few. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, says, I have seen bnei aliyah, children or descendants of elevation, as we'll discover in a moment, but there are very few. How many are they? There are 36 in every generation. We don't even know who they are, but they are complete tzaddikim. Says the Rebbe, the reason that the complete tzaddikim are called Bnei Aliyah, literally men of ascent, is that they convert evil and make it ascend to holiness. A complete tzaddik is somebody who does not put to sleep the evil. The evil is not something that exists. The evil converts into holiness, becomes holy. That's why they call Bnei Aliyah, men of ascent, because their behavior or their ability is so powerful that they can make the evil ascend to God, become part of God. And by doing so, they get much closer to God. I should just remind you, before you start imagining, these are not choices that given to men, generally speaking, mostly speaking. It is a gift that God would bestow certain people for a certain reason. It's just that one chapter in the entire Tanya, the Rabbi is dedicating to righteous men so that we know what righteous men are. These are men, as we'll discover in a moment in great details, are called Bnei Aliyah, men of ascent, because they are powerful, they have enough power to take the evil and convert it into holiness. Why is it so important? Because the evil, as we discovered in chapter 2, I believe, comes from a much greater level of holiness. Evil came from deep, 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 greater level of godliness. The problem is it was sent to do evil, to convince us to misbehave. What happens if we change it and convert it to holiness? Now it can help us get closer to God much higher than we can do by ourselves. The simple, most basic example that's brought in Hasidut, in Kabbalah, is V'rav Tvuot Bekoach Shor. If I need to plow the field, I plow with sticks, my own. I can get tired within an hour or two. What if I train an ox to plow the field? He can do the horseman, the horsepower that a bull or an ox has are 200 times as much as men, and he don't get tired. He can plow the field to a much greater degree, much deeper, much better, and much for many, many hours. And that's the idea of the evil. The evil is like the ox that is able to take us to a much greater connection to God. As it is similarly written in the introduction to the Zohar, that when Rabbi Chia wished to ascend to Eichal, heavenly shrine of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he heard a voice come out and says, whichever of you before coming here have converted the darkness of the world to light, holiness, and have transformed the bitter taste of their animal soul and evil inclination to sweetness, holiness, only these may enter. There is a story that appears in the Talmud. Rabbi Chia, one of the holiest men in the Tanaic era, one day decided to go to heaven and check it out because he didn't believe what people say, he wanted a proof. So he was lucky enough to go up to heaven and come back alive. I do not advise you to do it because I'm not sure you're going to come back. He came back and he said that he wanted to meet Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had died just 150 years earlier. He's the one who authored the Zohar. So he wanted to talk to him. As he's coming, each one has their own chamber, you know, their own private home and pool and golf court, etc. He hears, before he enters the chamber, a sounding voice coming from an angel probably. Anyone who is Bnei Aliyah, anyone who had ascended their evil and animal soul, converting it to holy, to positive, to good, is allowed to enter this street, this chamber. And he realized it's not for him, so he had to leave. So that's the uniqueness of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was able to convert evil into holiness. By the way, we see it in the story. Anybody know the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave, hiding in the cave? You heard that from me? Very briefly, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai defied the Romans and was punished by death. So he escaped. He ran away with his son, Rabbi Elazar, and they ran away to, it's a long story, they hid in a synagogue, but then they realized that maybe the Romans will torture his wife and make her reveal where she is. So they decided to run away. They went to a cave in the mountains up in the north of Israel. They got into a cave and they dug themselves into the soil, not to use their garments, so they are covered all day. And they studied all day, except they stopped for prayer and they continue studying. A miracle happened, and a spring of water passed by in the cave, and a carob tree. Carob is very nutritious. That's what I was told, and that's what they ate, and that's how they survived. By the 9 years or 10 years, 9 years later, for 9 years they studied. That's when they put together the Zohar. During those years. When 9 years later, I believe, they heard a sounding voice. Who is going to tell Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son that the Roman ruler who was evil had died, and they can come and live free under the sun? So they came out. Their skin was falling off. Their skin didn't see the sun for many years. Their skin was peeling off. But somehow they were able to cover their body, and they walked around. And suddenly Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai sees a man plowing his field with an ox. And he says, what is he doing? Taking a temporary business to plow so he can feed himself and forgetting about eternity, studying Torah. He looked at him and the man died. So a heavenly voice came back and says, did you come out of the cave to destroy my universe? Maybe you should go back. So he needed to go back, and he stayed there for another year or year and a half, I think. At that time, he heard a voice that says, you've been there long enough to realize that what the way you conduct yourself is inappropriate for the universe. So he came out from the cave, and he sees a man walking with 2 branches of willow. And he turned to the man and he says, where are you rushing? And the man says to him, you're Jewish, right? Don't you know it's almost Shabbat? So Rabbi Shimon says, I know it's almost Shabbat. So the man says to him, I'm holding those 2 willows, one for the 10 Commandments. In the 10 Commandments, God gave us, it's written in the Torah in 2 places, in the book of Exodus and in the book of Deuteronomy. 2 weeks ago, I read the 10 Commandments. In the 10 Commandments written in 2 places have some variations. Very few. One of the variations is, the first place it says Zachor, remember the Shabbos. The second time it says Shamor et Yom Shabbat, guard the Shabbos. And the rabbis teach us that the first one, God says, remember in a positive way. Eat well, dress nicely, relax. The second one, Shamor, guard yourself, don't answer the phone, don't travel on business trips, don't talk about your business affair, restrict yourself from doing mundane activities. That's how you celebrate Shabbat. That's why there is a change in the 10 Commandments. So he said, one for Zachor, one for Shamor. These 2 branches I'm taking home, so I'm going to smell them. They smell very, very pleasantly, to remember Shabbat and to guard myself from committing sin, from degrading Shabbat. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, wow, I see how people are utilizing this universe to serve God. I'm so lucky to live in this generation. And he was released. He was back to his normal. It took him years to heal, as I mentioned, but then he was able to assemble the group of sages and to codify the Zohar, the source of Kabbalah. The rabbis explained that what happened to him is in the year and a half, the second round, is when he turned to a complete tzaddik. Beforehand, he was a tzaddik, but he wasn't a complete tzaddik. There was some evil. That's why he couldn't stand when someone is plowing a field. According to him, you need to dedicate yourself to God. And therefore, you should sit and study Torah. Don't go plowing your field. The fact that you're going to starve, God will provide. You don't have to worry. The second time around, when he came, he became a complete tzaddik. So he only saw positive because there is no evil. So everything a man sees, there is something good in. And that's why he was blessing the person, and he realized that what people do, there is always a good outcome from it. That's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Chia, 150 years later, is going up to heaven and he wants to see him, to talk to him. And he's told, the only way you can enter this street, this avenue, is if you have converted and become Bnei Aliyah, become a man of ascent. You're able to ascend your evil into holiness, make it serve God the way the godly soul does. If you didn't, you have no hope. So that's unique to a tzaddik, and there is no variations. It's only one. An incomplete tzaddik, you may have 10,000 different levels, 15,000. In addition, I believe that there can be different levels in the different stages of life. I mean, before he's married, if he's a tzaddik, he has the evil that he didn't kill in one way. After he's married, after he has grandchildren, etc. But when it comes to a complete tzaddik, it's always the same. There is only one level. Another reason for the designation as Bnei Aliyah, the Rabbi is going to explain one other idea. Why are they called men of ascent? Even the divine service in the area of doing good, in the fulfillment of Torah and its mitzvot, is for the sake of the above, and their service is directed toward a most high level, towards the loftiest heights. I'm going to give you a short synopsis of what we're going to study. The first explanation of Bnei Aliyah, men of ascent, is because they're taking the evil and ascending it to God. It becomes holy. The second interpretation the Rabbi is going to say is even when they do a mitzvah, they perform with a godly soul on a much greater level than does the ordinary person. Because when they serve God, there are many, many ways to serve God, and they serve God in the highest level possible. That's why they called men of ascent, because their godly soul is serving God to a much greater level than an ordinary person. And that's what the Rabbi is saying. The divine service is not intended merely to attach themselves to God by serving Him through Torah and mitzvot, so as to quench the thirst of their soul which thirsts to God. The divine service of tzaddikim of lower levels may indeed be for the purpose of stilling their thirst for God and the desire to cleave to Him. For indeed, the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvot satisfies these needs. However, as it is written, Ho, exclaims the prophet, all who are thirsty for godliness should go to the waters of Torah. That is, let them engage in Torah, which is likened to water. As is explained elsewhere, that the thirsty ones of this verse refer to those who thirst for godliness. Again, we're dealing with a tzaddik. There are people at tzaddikim, incomplete tzaddik, that the reason they study Torah and perform good deeds is because they're thirsty to God, they're yearning to God, and they feel that they quench their thirst by studying Torah, by doing a mitzvah. A complete tzaddik doesn't do it out of benefit or desire. He does it because God said so. And it's not something that he's going to gain, even though it's holy. The prophet's words prove this point, where he addressing those who thirst for Torah, he need not exclaim, "Ho," nor direct them to its waters. Whoever thirsts for Torah will find it readily available for study. Rather, the prophet is addressing those who thirst for God, advising them to slake their thirst for Him through Torah, which binds one to God. The men of ascent, however, whom we have been discussing, are beyond this level of divine service. They do not study Torah or perform mitzvot with the intention of quenching their own thirst for godliness. For such services, and in a subtle sense, self-serving, as it is motivated by one's desire for a certain spiritual profit, namely the bliss of closeness to God. They are not serving God because they know they're going to get closer to God, because they have a desire to study Torah, because God said so, and no other reason. Rather, the service of God is, as the Tikkun Zohar explains, that which our sages have said, who is a pious one, Hasid, he who is benevolent, mitchased, towards his creator, Kono. The Tikkun Zohar comments that Kono, usually translated as creator, is here to be interpreted as his nest, the right from the root Ken, nest. And thus the Chassid is who is benevolent with his nest, that is, his source, God. This benevolence towards God consists of uniting the Holy One, blessed be, with the Shekhinah, the divine presence, so that the light of this union reach and be felt even in the lowest world. I'm sure you all understand very well what I just read. I'm just going to share a very, very abbreviated point. The prophet says, if you're thirsty for God, go to the water. Water refers to Torah. You study Torah, you connect to God, you feel that you quench your thirst for godliness. A righteous man is someone who is put to sleep his animal soul. Whenever they have a desire to connect to God, they feel drawn to God. They study Torah, they do a mitzvah, they help somebody, they perform a mitzvah with great fervor. However, says the Rebbe, this is, so to say, there is a little bit of a selfish, because they benefit. A true tzaddik have nothing to do with thirsts to God, have nothing to do with feeling good, have nothing to do but satisfying their desire. They do it naturally. As the Rabbi will explain an example. In a moment, we'll see the example. A righteous man that is complete tzaddik will serve God because God has asked to serve him. And therefore, he has to do it, not because he feels something in return that he's getting. That's why he's called a man of ascent, because he's serving and his behavior is all about God, not about him. As is also explained in Raya Mehemna and Parshat Tetzeh in the Zohar, in the manner of a son who exerts himself for his father and mother, whom he loves more than himself, more than his own nefesh, ruach, and neshama, and who sacrifices his life for their sake to redeem them, should they be held in captivity, and as is also explained elsewhere. The Rebbe is using an example that the Zohar brings. Naturally, a father or mother will do everything they can to save their child, even at the cost of their life. Anybody is agreeing with it? If you disagree, let me know. That's why when God tells Abraham, go and sacrifice your son, how old was his son? Anybody knows?
47.
37 is correct. So he wasn't a lad. He wasn't 2 years old. He was 37. Why do we call it a test to Abraham? What about Yitzchak? Yitzchak also agreed. He could have protested. He could have said, tell God to come to me. Yitzchak, Isaac, they had no idea what is going on until Abraham said to him, God asked me to slaughter you. And he says, okay, I'm ready. I don't understand. Couldn't we give him some credit too for Yitzchak? Especially he did not hear it directly from God. And there are many other questions, and there are many, many, many answers. The answers that belong to our discussion is the only one I want to address. It is that it is much harder for a man to see his son getting killed than the man himself getting killed. If God would say to Abraham, go kill yourself, I want you to become a sacrifice. Of course, it's a test that I don't know what I'll do, and I don't know, I don't want to judge if people did or not. But asking Abraham to slaughter his son is much more painful than to slaughter himself. A man will be willing to say, how many times you have people who will say, I'm giving up, I'll give whatever I can so my son should be healthy. I've heard it from so many people. I've known so many people. There is a rabbi, unfortunately, now he's not well. His child was not well, and he came crying to me, asking me to pray for him. He says, let God take care of me. Why is he doing it to my children? My children didn't do anything to deserve that. Because this is a natural instinct. Are we doing it? Not we, it shouldn't happen to anybody. Is the father and mother doing it to gain anything? Are they doing it because they want the world to give them credit? Are they doing it because the child is going to thank them? The answer is there is no benefit whatsoever. But why do parents do it? Natural instinct. Now imagine a tzaddik, a complete tzaddik, the same connection. It's not even a love, because when you love somebody and you do something for them, you feel good. What the rabbi is saying that Bnei Aliyah, men of ascent, refer to is people who are connected to God on a whole different plateau. It's nothing to do with love or benefit or pleasure or gaining something. They do it because natural instinct. There is only good. There is no evil inclination to block, to divert, to make us put our intention into a new Harry Potter or a new iPhone. Rather, it's all about God. That's why they're called men of ascent. So again, we have two levels of men of ascent. We have two explanations to men of ascent. One explanation is they are called men of ascent because they ascend the evil and make it holy to God. Another level of men of ascent is because they're bound with God, and serving of God is beyond love that we know when people love God and therefore serve God. Because when people do it out of love, they get in return, they get something. But our love towards God, the Rabbi the Zohar is saying it the other way around, that children will put themselves in front of their parents, even though there is no benefit whatsoever that they will get from it, but that's the way that healthy human beings are. And the same is that righteous man. His connection to God is a very natural connection. There is no other way, and because he has no evil. The evil is now positive, and therefore he's serving God. So it's not because of love, not because he's gaining, it's not because he's thirsty, it's because that's the natural connection that exists. Such is the divine service of men of ascent. It is wholly altruistic, motivated only by a desire to please God and make his presence felt everywhere. The Alter Rebbe now goes on to explain that the two aforementioned interpretations of the term men of ascent accord with each other and are in fact complementary. The rabbi is going to use a metaphor that will connect these two interpretations together, and that's a deep Kabbalah idea. I'm going to share a little bit of it as we study it again, and it will come up many, many times. It is a Kabbalistic axiom that the elevation of man, initial for Main Nukvin, literally feminine water, affects a corresponding descent of mud, initials of Main Duchin, literally masculine waters. This means that the arousal of a feminine level, that is a recipient, which is in our case means the efforts of men below in action directed upwards towards God, causes a reciprocal arousal of the masculine level, that is the giver, meaning in our case, God's benevolence as it flows downwards and is bestowed upon men. I'm going to just explain what we just studied. How do you say water in Hebrew?
Mayim.
Thank you. Now, why do you say mayim? Mayim is plural. Anybody knows? Did I tell you that there are 3 words in Hebrew that are always plural, even if it's only to one? There is no such thing as... Very good. What are the others 2 words? Shamayim, very good. Shamayim, because there are 7 heavens. And the third one, nobody knows?
Oy.
Chaim, life. Life. You don't call it chai. Chai is someone who is alive. It's a different. But the term life in Hebrew, you say chaim, chaim arukim. May you be blessed with long life. We say you should be blessed with chaim arukim. Why is it plural? Not because of YOLO, but the opposite. What, anybody knows what YOLO is?
You only live once?
Right. It's not true. Because you live twice. You live physical world and life after life.
Spiritual world. Yeah.
So we call it Chaim. Shamayim, there are 7 heavens. That's why you call it the sky or the heavens. not Sham or Shem, whatever. Another one is the word that we're going to talk about is Mayim. Why? Because there is upper water and lower water. Come the Zohar and says there are two categories. The following, what I share, I'm giving just a concentrated, just what needed for us to understand the concept the Rabbi is talking about. We will develop it later on in later chapters in many, many details because it appears at least 3 or 4 more times. There are some type of water that are called female water or feminine water, and there are some that are called male water, masculine water. Masculine like a male, and feminine like a female. How do I know? We will explain just the way a relationship between men and women work is the relationship between God and the creature, the humanity. What is unique about the relationship between men and a male and a female is both are united, but the male is providing and the female is the recipient, mekabel, recipient. In addition, we are told that somebody has to awaken or create the relationship. Sometimes the female create a relationship and that causes the male to connect. Sometimes the male create a relationship and the female connects. This is the way it works by male and female because it works like that between us and God. And it's very, very important to know who is the one who started it. Why? God is the male, the masculine, the giver. He is the one who is giving. We receive the gift from God. We are the female. We are the feminine. We receive from God. That's why if we had a course about male and female, we will talk about sun and moon. The Jewish people are compared to the moon. The moon receives all its light from the sun because we are a feminine level of water, okay? If the awakening starts from above, from the male, it will not last so much. It will awake the female, but we call it a temporary awakening, a temporary relationship, a temporary connection. If it comes from below, if it starts from below, it might be on a lower level, but it will last. It will hold much longer. I'm going to use an example. There are many examples. I see that it's hard for you to digest because these are things I didn't want to get into details. If you have a teacher and student, you have a great professor who is teaching a class. He's very versed in the topic. He's the giver. He is teaching. The student is the recipient, right? Now, if the teacher is only talking and talking and talking, even though he teaches great ideas, you cannot put a funnel on the head of the students and start pouring ideas. It's just not going to work. The best way to teach is to evoke the students' curiosity, to make them ask questions, desire to study. Is that true? Yeah. Yes? Now, if the teacher would be giving a monologue and talk for 45 minutes, I guarantee you, I bet my money on it, that 99.9% of the students don't even have 5% of the teaching that the teacher is teaching them. There are very few people, extremely few people who are able to concentrate for that long and listen. What happens if the students want to learn? The students have questions and the teacher is answering questions or involve them in the process. At that point, he has to take it much slower. He cannot teach everything he wants to teach. He has to teach what they want to hear and the answer to questions they had. He was planning to talk about something else, but they are asking about totally different topic. He has to answer them. At that point, even though the teaching is a much slower paced and a much lower quality, it will connect. It will establish knowledge in the student's point of mind. Is that clear so far? Any question to that? No? Okay. Says the Rebbe. When revelation is a connection between God and the Jew, comes from above, that God creates the revelation, it's very powerful, but it does not last a long time. How do we know? God gave us a very powerful revelation on Mount Sinai. What happens 40 days later? They cheated. Nothing is left out of it. That's why, by the way, Mount Sinai is not a holy mountain. Anybody can walk on it. It says as soon as God ascended from the mountain returned back to its normal mountain. So much so that we don't even know which mountain it is. There's disputes, there's all kinds of ideas. On the other hand, what happened later on, 1,000 years later, came Purim. The holiday of Purim, the Jewish people were tested. Are they going to stick with Judaism or not? Haman wanted to kill them all. What do? They fast and they pray to God, and they are preparing themselves to kill them, to get killed for God's sake. The conclusion of the Megillah, of the story of Purim, is at this point, the Jewish people accepted that which they received before. And the Talmud explains that the authors of the Megillah teach us that it took 1,000 years for the Jewish people to prove that they actually accept the Torah. Until that point, it was hovering over them, and not always they accepted the Torah. Only 1,000 years later, when they themselves awoke and realized that they have to come closer to God, and they fasted and they begged God to come back to them, that's when they actually received the Torah. That's why the Temple Mount, the mountain where the Holy Temple was built by human being, and therefore the holiness never left. Once God rested there, he came down. It's not like Mount Sinai that God came with all kinds of commotion, fireworks, etc. But even when God left to exile, when we all left, that place is still holy, as opposed to Mount Sinai, because it was created by human beings. So it's a much lower scale, but however, it's much everlasting. Why is it important? The point is, as I said, it spills into many, many levels. When I teach somebody, or when I relate to my children, I can look at it from my point of view. And from my point of view, I expect so much, or I want them to know so much. That might be my choice. However, when I actually push come to shove, it will not work. It might work temporarily, but it wouldn't last. However, instead, if I lower myself to their level and says, tell me where you are and what makes you comfortable, how will you be able to move? And I slow the pace and I follow their pace, now it will be a unity that will last, that will work. Did you all understand? So today I have a son who is turning 12, and he said to me, Ta, I need my mimer. On his bar mitzvah, he's going to say a Hasidic discourse. And I said to him, let's find it. So together we searched for this discourse. It's a Hasidic teaching like this in Yiddish. So I found it with vowels. So he says to me, oh, it looks like too many pages. And it's a lot of pages. I don't think I can do it. So the first thing I said to him, I don't understand. You have a teacher, you have music, you can learn, you can listen to it all day long. And you have vowels. When I was a child, I wasn't given time to study it. I had to study it in between lessons on my own. Nobody helped me except my father would ask me once a week, what are you holding? Never tested me. There was no vowels. I had to figure the words myself. I didn't speak Yiddish. It was in Yiddish. It was much more challenging. That's what I said to her. I says, I didn't have all that. And I offer you, somebody recorded the whole discourse in a Hasidic tune, so with a melody you can. So he said to me, I'm not living in your time. So I said to him, you're right. I held myself back. I realized that he's right. So I said to him, you know what? Let's print one page, walk on one page. He says, and only one page? I says, yeah, only one page. Let's do one page. It's 9 pages. We'll do only one page. He says, and I'm free after that. You do not need to know at this point more than one page. And it made him feel excited. And in other words, we have to lower ourselves to the level of the recipient. If I were to come and say, here are 9 pages, start, it's not going to happen. But if I say to him, that's the only one you have to think about, it's much, much easier for the person and they are able to absorb. That's why, so Mayim Duchin, water that come from above, is one way. They connect. Why is it Mayim? Why do we call it Mayim in Aramaic, which is water? Because water bind. There is nothing that's bind objects better than water. Water will connect mud, or make mud, connect soil. Water will connect objects together. Nothing will connect. So the liquid, the water that come from above are called male or masculine water. The water that come from below are called feminine or female water. And this is the introduction to this idea in Kabbalah, and then we'll apply it to the tzaddik, the righteous, and God. It is a Kabbalistic axiom that the elevation of feminine waters affect a corresponding descent of masculine water. In other words, if the feminine water comes up, it will bring masculine water, or the masculine water can bring up if it comes first. This means that the arousal of the feminine level, that is the recipient, which in our case means the effort of men below in action directed upwards towards God, causes a reciprocal arousal of the masculine level, that is the giver, meaning in our case God's benevolence as it flows downwards and is bestowed upon men. Applying this to the service of men of ascent, we find the following. The aspect of their service mentioned in the first interpretation, that they elevate evil and convert it to good, constitutes an ascent of man, of ascent of feminine water. The aspect mentioned in the second interpretation, that by their service of love, they draw down godliness, God's presence upon earth, constitute a descent of mud, for bringing down a masculine water. For every mitzvah that they perform as a channel for the descent of God's presence, is an expression of God's benevolence. Thus, the two interpretations are complementary, since the ascent of man, the ascent of feminine, is what causes the descent of masculine, and as stated above. Did you understand what the rabbi is saying? That you have two interpretations to men of ascent. One interpretation is that they ascend also the evil to make it holy and ascend to God. Another meaning of ascent is that their connection to God is not out of love, not because they are thirsty, it's because it's a natural instinct. Says the Rebbe, these are two levels of connection. The first one is the feminine is rising up above and bringing the masculine, because the evil is turning and elevated to God. The second one is going backwards, where their connection is so natural that God himself lowers himself to connect to them, and that makes the connection. I hope you understood it. Will play out in many other aspects as we'll study Tanya. The Alter Rebbe employs Kabbalistic terms in his explanation, which are explained in Chassidut at length. They will become clearer in the course of further study. As we'll continue Tanya, it will come back over again. In the Alter Rebbe's words, both interpretations are complementary, for by defining the good found in Klipat Nuga, as the men of ascent do by converting their animal soul, which is derived from Klipat Nuga, to good, one elevates feminine water up to God, affecting unions in the higher realms so as to cause masculine water to descend to this on this world. These masculine waters are the water of kindness that flow into and are contained in each of the 248 positive mitzvot, which are all in the nature of kindness or benevolence and masculine waters. And the Rebbe concludes this term, masculine waters, as applied to mitzvot, means that the mitzvot draw God's holiness from above, that is, from the higher realm downwards, so that God's holiness be clothed in and revealed within the lowest realms, that is, our physical world. As explained elsewhere, thus the two interpretations of the term men of ascent are complementary. And we have completed chapter 10. Let me just summarize. The rabbi has devoted one chapter, chapter number 10, to discussing a righteous from the 5 levels. We have an incomplete or righteous or a righteous man who has evil. And then we have another one, a complete tzaddik or a tzaddik who is only good. And the rabbi, the first part talks about the incomplete tzaddik for a much longer period, because there are many levels. And when it comes to the complete tzaddik, there is only one level. The complete tzaddik is called also man of ascent, because either two interpretations, either he ascends, is able to become holy and connect to God, or because he's able to ascend to God and connect to God on a level that's natural without any love or gaining any benefit. Next week, chapter 11, the rabbi will dedicate to a wicked person. There are 2 types of wicked, a wicked that is good and a wicked that is evil. And just like by tzaddik, we have 2 levels of wicked. And finally, chapter 12, we will talk about the Beinoni, the middle, the one in the middle. As we've discovered, it's not somebody who has half good and half bad. It's impossible. He has no evil at all. Otherwise, he would be a rasha, a wicked. And then we'll continue all the rest of the chapters dealing with the Beinoni, giving the Beinoni advice how to connect to God and remain connected. We will conclude right here and continue chapter 11, God willing, next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well, everybody.
And you also.